Hello, learners, and welcome to week 27 of U.S. History, Foundations to Reconstruction. Today we are continuing onward discussing slavery. We talked a little bit about it last week. So you are going to do the essay called Escaped Slave, and there's a project on slave code. So the Escaped Slave essay, it says, imagine you're a skilled slave artisan living in a well-run, prosperous plantation. Write an essay of 300 words telling why you decide to escape to the north, okay? So basically, you have to show me an understanding of what life was like for a slave on a plantation, even if you were a skilled artisan. Tell me a little bit about life. It doesn't have to be exactly 300 words. And then the next one, you're going to look at the slave codes, okay? So you'll go through and you'll look at exactly, the slave laws, slave codes. They varied from state to state. You'll look at it and you'll go through and you'll do a little bit of research on it, but what specific restrictions, were placed on the slaves. How did free blacks respond to some of the slave codes? How did abolitionists, or what did abolitionists do in response to slave codes? So go through and, think about life, what life was like under the slave codes and how it affected everybody. Okay, so I found a few videos here, families in slavery and the system of American slavery. So we'll start with the families first, and then we'll go to the system of American slavery. So hopefully this works.
What Alex Haley was able to do through Pinta, what we saw in Roots, was a visual representation that even under the most extreme circumstances, one had a duty to protect one's family, one had a duty to define oneself, to carry oneself with dignity, and to always strive for freedom.
They can put the chains on your body. Never let them put the chains on your mind.
Chattel slavery meant that enslaved people were the personal, private property of their owners. And law recognized that. That's why it was not uncommon for slaves to be punished with every kind of torture imaginable, whether it was the idea that if a slave runs away, let's cut off one of his toes. He runs away again, let's cut off his whole foot.
No! No, please don't!
You could not take your master to court. You could not testify in court. You could not serve on a jury. So there was no way to sort of find justice. Self-defense did not exist within the institution.
Did you really think a nigger could accuse me, a white man, of anything at all?
Enslavement is fundamentally the history of commodifying human beings. That's what it is. It's about saying that your value can be reduced to a price. It's important for us to remember that enslaved people lived their lives in families because it reminds us of the ways that they were opposing their commodification. Historians and scholars use the term fictive kin, the creation of family ties in order to replace the family ties that have been so brutally wrenched from you. And I think that those are really the foundation for what we come to know about Afro-American cultural and historical life under slavery.
Yo, ornery, Mandinka ways, they done start to rub off on me.
I don't think we can really know what it meant to live under the constant fear that you might be sold away from your family. Slavery imposed a very particular experience of trauma. Sometimes it reached right into your cabin and wrenched you out of it.
Okay, so that was family and how they developed the family and how the family was torn apart, unfortunately, and, living under the system of slavery with your family and, trying to do what's best and try to keep your family together, but it doesn't always work out. Okay, and this is going to talk about a little bit about the system of American slavery. Okay, so here we go.
When we talk about the wealth of the South, we're talking about wealth in enslaved human beings. In fact, those enslaved human beings in the pre-Civil War period range, depending on the year, between 15 and 20% of the total wealth in the U.S. That means that enslaved people are worth more than all the factories, all the stocks and bonds, and all the currency combined. In the 1850s, an enslaved young man about 18, 19, 20 years old in New Orleans goes for anywhere between $1,000 and $1,500. If we account for inflation, that $1,000 to $1,500 actually is equivalent to about $230,000 to $250,000. It's a ton of money.
And they are sold with no particular consideration to parentage.
You can't tell me to leave my family. I ain't going nowhere for you. You understand me?
There are very, very few cases where it disturbs the property relation. Men might acknowledge the biological tie, but they don't often recognize the kinship tie.
Thank you. Your Chicken George has skill. As one gentleman to another, I'd like to buy the boy from you.
Because slavery is so central to their economies, they become very invested in making sure that slavery persists. And so that's where you get things like the idea that slave status is heritable through the line of the mother. The slave societies of the Americas are the most brutal and oppressive because they went so far in the direction of making slavery an enclosed system. Different states passed laws trying to limit the freedom of slave owners to free enslaved people. But much more often, there were stipulations that a person who was freed had to leave the state within 90 days, within 6 months. That reflects a fear that free Black people, simply by virtue of being free, are dangerous to a slave society. And if you have too many free Black people kind of functioning in your community, they advertise the possibility of freedom to the enslaved population.
Just finding the power within that system to survive took a tremendous amount of courage. And it really is a testament to the human spirit that African Americans were able to survive that system and ultimately to be able to do great things coming out of that system.
So hopefully you have a better understanding of slavery and everything that came with it and the culture. Before I had watched that, the second video, I knew that, slavery was expensive to the owners, and that's why they valued the slaves so much. But I did not realize in today's value it was $230,000 to $250,000. A very nice house in the area of Pennsylvania where I live. So if you think about it, essentially, every man who is in great shape is worth essentially $230,000 to $250,000. So each slave that you would lose could cost you essentially a house. So if you put it in terms like that, this is why they spent so much time and effort to get an escaped slave back. So, okay, so that should help you actually with your escaped slave writing. It should give you an idea of why, even if you were an artisan having a skill, you might want to escape. Okay, so if you have any questions or concerns, reach out to me. Remember, you're doing assignments 4.11 and 4.12 for the week of 27. Okay, thanks. Bye.